What's going on, everyone? We're back at it, ready to have some fun with Found North Whiskey. Let's see who we have in the chat tonight. Let's see who is here. See who we have coming in here. See some people online. What's going on, everyone? How's everybody doing this evening? Yeah, let's have a quiet group tonight. Where's everyone? What's going on? I guess people are still kind of getting dialed in and so forth. We'll make sure we got everyone here in a couple minutes. We'll get kicked off. There we go. There's Troy. What's going on, Troy Cassell? What's going on, Troy? AKA the Columbus King, or King of Columbus, might even be better. Paul, what's going on, my man, Paul? How are you, buddy? Good to see Paul. All right. I see my buddy Copper Wolf, AKA Ryan. What's going on, Copper Wolf? Representing my good friend. Zoolander is here, AKA Jimmy. What's going on, Jimmy? King of Philly. Philadelphia. Who else we have? Rob Sullivan. What's going on, Rob? How are you, man? Good to see you, my friend. Who else we got? Anthony. Hey, Anthony. How are you, man? Good to see you. Always a blast. Who else we have in the house? We have Frank. There we go. Frank. I should call it Frank the Tank. That'd be a good one, actually. Keith Banks. What's going on, Keith? How are you, man? Good to see you. Good to see you. All right. Enough with me. So today on the channel, we have Found North Whiskey. So I'm going to give everyone a quick backstory about Found North Whiskey. So one of our good friends, a lot of us whiskey tubers are all, we all kind of collaborate and talk offline and help each other out and so forth. So my good friends, Josh and Aaron over at Stuff and Whiskey, which, by the way, check out Josh and Aaron if you guys haven't not done thus far. Really super cool couple. So Josh gave me a call one day. He's like, Judge, have you heard about Found North Whiskey? And I'm like, no, I have not. And then he starts to tell me all about it. And he's like, you got to try their whiskey. It's the best thing since sliced bread. And Josh is, I'm like, come on, Josh, come on, seriously. Is it really that good? He's like, Judge, you have to try their whiskey. So Josh ended up actually introducing me to Nick, one of the co-founders of Found North Whiskey. So that's how we are here today. And I will say it was hard, very hard, not to finish these bottles that I received from Found North Whiskey. I had to hold back. That might give it away a little bit. You guys know I don't have a poker face, so let me go ahead and bring on the one of the co-founders of Found North Whiskey, our good friend Nick. Nick, what's going on, man?
What's up, man? How are you?
Good, man. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Glad to have you on, man. This is I've had a lot of people reach out to me about like Found North, like since I told like my patrons and put it out there on Instagram. A lot of people are like, all right, I wanted to learn more about Found North. So this is like a little bit of pressure, but not for me, more for you.
Good. I like it.
Oh man. So Nick, why don't you give everyone maybe just like let's call it let's give everyone the Cliff Notes version of how did Found North Whiskey get started?
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll try to keep it to the Cliff Notes. But basically, I started this company with my brother Zach, and really we had a small team, and we wanted to launch a whiskey. We had an importing license. We were importing some things. We were doing some brand ambassador work and some consulting, but we were constantly on the lookout for. We were really looking for good whiskey. And I would say that one of the sort of defining characteristics of our brand and our company is sorry, somebody said Nick's got that robot laugh, and I almost died.
That is pretty damn funny. That's 20 minutes.
So that totally got me. I was in flow. It just caught my eye because I saw my name, and I was just already I'm losing it. Oh no! So
I love it. That is hilarious.
All right. So I think one of the really interesting things about our brand is that we're like whiskey fanatics, and for us, when we were looking for a whiskey, we were looking for a whiskey to make that would be really suitable to us just as serious whiskey drinkers. And I think a lot of times like whiskey brands that start have a very clear picture of like this is what we're going to be. This is we want to be the best this, and this is exactly how we're going to do it. And
Sure.
we're going to be a 6-year-old bourbon, and we're going to market it this way. And they kind of have a vision for exactly what it's going to be before it launches. And we more were like, rather than trying to sort of fit the brand, trying to sort of fit the whiskey into a brand idea that we had, we said, all right, let's go find where the best value and the most interesting whiskey is, and then let's build around that. And that's how we ended up in Canada, to be honest, because we're a bunch of Americans making Canadian whiskey. It doesn't make any sense. And so basically, we were well aware that Canadian distilleries were pumping out really good rye. So that's where we started. We were like, we were looking for aged, high quality rye whiskey, something that was kind of missing in the American market. And frankly, like, a lot of the old ryes they're from Canada, even if they have a U.S. label on them.
That's so true. There's a lot of brands out there too, right? That will admit that as well, that they've sourced their older rye whiskey from Canada. So I mean, it's known. We all know it. We may not want to admit it. We all know it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for us, I honestly, that's how we came up with the name. Our whole spiel was like, let's source the whiskey from Canada. Let's source the old rye from Canada, and then let's just be really upfront about where it came from, how we made it, etc. And so we ended up calling it Found North, right? Like, real straightforward. We found the whiskey north.
I love it.
but there was also a real sense of kind of aspiration, in the sense that, like, not only did we find this whiskey north of the border, but we wanted to give people the opportunity to kind of rediscover Canadian whiskey, because the perception of Canadian whiskey is not, first of all, it's not unfair, and it's not always the best perception.
Right.
So
it's not always
speak,
a good
right?
one. You're right.
It's not always a good one.
And
so as we started to find, it started with rye, but as we started to look at what was available, we started finding really old corn, really old wheat, really old, actually some old barley that we haven't touched yet. But we started finding a lot of these really excellent, older, well-made whiskeys.
Sure.
And our attitude was really simple. It was like, okay, this is great value. We can buy it way. It's much cheaper than buying bourbon or American rye. And we can, rather than sort of watering it down, chill filtering it, adding caramel coloring, we can just blend it to a style that really appeals to the drinker of American whiskey, the sort of serious American whiskey drinker. And then not do these things to it, right? Not adulterate it down.
For the whiskey, just blend it, make it great. No additives. So I think I heard you say that, right? There's no additives in any of your batches, right?
Yep, zero.
That's awesome.
Zero additives. And so that was, and our feeling was, because all the time, one question we get all the time is like, why didn't you just go to MGP?
Yeah,
right? It was like, it's like pretty okay. If you're if you're not going to distill it yourself, like, why aren't you just going to MGP or Heaven Hill or one of these? Why aren't you just making American whiskey? And for us, our feeling was we'd rather source really great whiskey that we can sell, that has a substantial age statement that we can sell at really good value, and bring people closer and wrap people's head around the fact that it's from Canada, rather than buying younger whiskey that were the last dog to the bull, right? Correct. I mean, everybody has been picking these clean for years. So why would we go sell 4-year-old MGP for $100 that is represented by 50 other brands already? So true. So that was it.
That's
that was really it. Yeah.
Cool. No, I love it. So one thing that you said to me, and this is one thing that stood out as well, right? And I remember when Josh was like, dude, the whiskey is old. And I'm like, well, like, what do you mean? Like 10 years? He's like, no, like old, like 15 plus. So I'm looking at these bottles. So this is batch 3. and this is
Yep.
age 17 years, but technically it even has whiskey with it up to 21 and 25-year-old whiskey in it.
Yes.
But of course, obviously, they always state like the lowest age. So batch 3 starts at 17, but goes up to 25. Batch 4 age on average 18 years. So your whiskey is, I mean, a lot of it is truly really it's excuse my French, it's old as shit, which is good though. All right, that's pretty
Hell
cool.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's an interesting aspect of whiskey in that a lot of times what you hear from the industry
sure.
is in terms of the messaging and telling you what's important from a flavor standpoint often matches what people have available to them, right?
Yeah,
So like
true.
if you look at scotch 10 years ago,
Yeah,
they were the age kings, right?
yeah,
They had all this old whiskey and they just hammered age is all that matters, age is all that matters. And then of
yeah.
course all their old stuff got drunk up and you started seeing all these non-age statement stuff coming in and the whole messaging changed. It just flipped on its head. Age suddenly didn't matter, right?
Yep.
And
So true.
so so often a lot of what people say, what the industry is sort of messaging is what they have available.
Yeah,
If they
that's a good
have
point.
old whiskey and that's their advantage, that's
Correct.
what they're going to
And they're
harp
going
on.
to pump that up.
If they don't, then they're going to do other stuff. They're going to put it in an interesting finish. They're going to
Correct.
jack up the proof. They're going to do these other things and then try to kind of appeal to the consumer
Yeah.
and focus the sort of attention on whatever is their strength.
Indeed. Oh, I
And
love
that
that you
and
guys found your space. You found what works for you. So, number one, you're using older age Canadian whiskey. Number two, there are no additives. So, everyone kind of
yep,
just be clear on that. And then number three, you're not just taking the straight corn or rye. You're blending the different, the different mash bills, like the different,
100%.
together to make it a certain batch, which is pretty cool. So, I like the whole concept. I like that. All right.
Heck yes. And so so it's the interesting thing about the blending is we see a lot of we've seen a lot of brands based in the US that are picking Canadian whiskey and they're even saying that it's Canadian whiskey.
Yep.
But what's interesting is they're they're purchasing it from these Canadian distilleries as if it was MGP. So they're just buying a
Yeah.
lot and bottling
Right.
it.
And bottling
And
it.
and Canadian whiskey is not designed that way. The fundamental difference between American and Canadian whiskey is back 110 years ago or so, the Canadians started cultivating enzymes, so they didn't need to add barley to everything. So they started doing these 100% corns, 100% ryes, 100% wheats.
Okay.
And the idea was to distill them separately, age them separately, and create these components that were really easy to blend with. But
Okay.
the point wasn't to make complete whiskeys. The point wasn't like, oh, we just want to make 100% rye or 100%
Sure.
corn.
Yeah.
And so it's funny for us because we see the Americans that are buying Canadian whiskey
Mhm.
are often treating it like it's MGP and they're not blending it. So they're
Right.
not really taking advantage of what's great about Canadian whiskey.
Yeah.
And then the Canadians are blending it and then watering it down until filtering and doing all this shit to it.
Everyone's basically screwing it up in either direction,
We're
basically.
like, yo, we just want to live right in the middle of you two. Like,
So you guys just slide it right in between. I like that. Good
yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
Oh man. So Terrence is already putting some pressure. I love that, Terrence. Thank you, man. And then also Blake. So Terrence says we want I guess a single barrel blend for a bourbon judge pick for our Patreon group. I hear it, Terrence.
Baby.
Let me work with Nick on that one if that's okay, Terrence.
Yeah,
And Nick,
we'll
hopefully
talk
that's
about
cool
that.
with you too.
Yeah, heck yes.
So Jim said he's late to the party, but he poured some batch 6.
Oh,
Batch
baby.
6. Oh man. We can't start at batch 6. Let's
We
work our
gotta
way
end with
through.
batch 6.
Yo, we gotta end with batch 6. That's like, oh my gosh. All right. I'm ready to dive into some whiskey if you don't mind. Let's start with batch 3 if you don't mind.
Yeah, I got it poured.
You got to pour it already. Look at you. You're already ahead of the game. I like it. All right. So tell me about batch 3. Just like even like for a lot of your whiskeys, where can you find Found North? Where can more is it mostly like in different like retail stores? Is it online? Combination? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, so it's tricky when you're a brand starting out. You want to be accessible, but it's hard to enter a market with a couple hundred bottles, right? So
Yeah, so
you're kind of trying to balance the we want to enter markets and have a retail presence. But at the same time, I hate the idea of only being available in like 10 states. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would suck.
Yeah.
And particularly because like the whiskey discovery world now is so partly because, well, actually largely because of COVID, is so much more online, right?
It
Like
is.
it used to be you went into your retailer and you said, what's new? Now you go find the bourbon judge and you follow him and you go to his live stream and you say, hey, what's new?
Yeah.
And
So
so
true.
for us, we went and created a direct to consumer e-com platform kind of as quickly as we could.
Oh, love it.
And so if you go to our website, we're available, I think, in like 41 states. It's something like that now.
Nice.
And we're on Sealbox and we're on SharePour. And those guys cover some other of the
Other
kind of
states
cover some of the other states
Yeah.
that we're not in. And then we've worked our way into, and we're working our way into some of the rest of the states. So really our goal is not to have this huge footprint, but
Yeah.
our goal is really, if you've heard about us and you live in the US, we want you to be able to get a bottle. And we're working towards that. We are in stores in, I think, 12 states. And
Okay.
probably halfway through the year, I guess that gets to about 20.
20. Okay, that's cool. All right. So a couple of different, so a good number of states, but then also online, which you're right, with COVID, everything changed the game with COVID. So now, as long as you can truly trust like a brand, like, honestly,
Yes.
like in this case, how Aaron and Josh from Stuff and Whiskey voucher, they were like, Judge, their whiskey is fantastic. At least you can get it online. It's
Yes.
like it's so it's just like perfect, It really
Yes.
is. It really is. What else we have here? So Terrence says the batch 4 is a hitter. Well, we're gonna get there too, Terrence. But I'm ready to start with batch 3. So batch 3 is a rye.
Yep.
Obviously, but this is also you have some corn in here, some barley to your point as well, because you guys do blend it as well. And the youngest age in this is 17 years. Wow. Let me get into this real quick. Oh,
yes. Man. Yes. So this is a fun blend. So this is 64% rye. It's 32% corn and it's 4% malted barley. While the Canadians do these 100% rye, 100% corns, these they call them single streams.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll actually still put, even though they're adding the enzymes that the barley is responsible for, even though they're cultivating and adding those, they'll still put in a fraction of barley for flavor. So we didn't like put a few drops of barley in there. That's actually just a result of the ryes that we were blending in.
Okay.
The interesting thing though is we measured the liquid ratios as opposed to the mash bill. So when you buy a bottle of Found North, it'll say grain ratio instead of mash bill. And it's just because there's a little bit, and we won't get too geeky with this, but basically there's a difference in sugar content, or effectively starch content, in corn and rye.
Yeah.
Corn has a lot more. So when you do a mash bill, you're measuring the weight, and you're not factoring in the sugar content, and you'll get way more alcohol from the thing that has more sugar in it.
Okay.
So like for us, a 32% corn seems like it's pretty high, but because it's liquid ratio, this is actually a really high rye. It would drink like an 85% rye if it were an American mash bill.
Which makes sense. Which totally makes sense, because I've been sipping it.
It's very spice forward. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah,
it's very
spice forward. This doesn't drink like this. There are a lot of ryes out there that very intelligently drink like bourbon because people love bourbon. And frankly, we made one like that. One of the first single barrel we released last year. It's like I would, if you traced it blind, my guess is half the people would guess it's rye and half the people would guess it's bourbon.
That's awesome. No, this is definitely a rye. This is a true rye fan rye right here. This is damn near delicious. Very green, like very like much like notes of like apple, tons of mint, pepper. This is really, really nice. So Henry has a question. He said he's looking for either batch 4 or batch 6 for his wedding. Which would you recommend for a special day?
Oh, damn. Yo, Henry needs to email me. Henry, email me at nick@foundnorthwhiskey.com and we'll talk after. Maybe I can get you something extra special for a wedding, man. A wedding is like, you should open a ridiculous bottle. Yeah. That being said, for me, geez, I'd probably go with 4 because going to be a little bit more of a crowd pleaser, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a difference at a wedding. It's risky to pour something that is at 128 point
That's true.
128.2
Yeah.
proof. Just because there are going to be some people who don't, God forbid, there might be someone who shoots it.
Yep.
Um,
Give me that castrate down north over there.
Boom.
Too funny. The next thing you know, they're done. Oh man, so batch 3 was darn delicious. This is it's one of those things where I think I love you guys like you said, like the breakdown. I think you guys did a fantastic job with blending batch 3. It's because it's like a traditional rye, but it's sweet at the same time. But you still always know throughout from start to finish that it's a rye, right? From start to finish, it doesn't even kind of cross over into I'm almost like a bourbon at all. It really doesn't. So nice job with batch 3 there, Nick. I like that.
Thank you.
Pretty good. Yeah. Pretty good. Troy says he loves this concept, so need more unique offerings like that. That's a good point, Troy. I love it. I love that. You're right. I love the whole concept. I mean, honestly, before this, I never knew, even the whole concept of kind of blending different, older age Canadian whiskeys was even something that someone would even think of. So, but obviously you and your brother did. So that's pretty cool.
I've been in whiskey now for about a decade, and I got to tell you, like, the consumer, the reason that we can make stuff like this is because the consumer has gotten much more open-minded about I'd say like categorical flexibility. When I first started, I was working in retail, and if I was talking to somebody who was drinking single malt scotch, and I said, hey, there's this really cool Japanese single, no chance, nope, don't want to drink. It was like like, all I drink is this, and this is all I believe in. And really, the consumer's actually gotten way more sophisticated about, like, hey, if this is done with best practices, I'm much less concerned about the category and much more interested in, does it taste good, and do they make it?
Totally agree. Totally agree. Honestly, I was telling one of my buddies locally, so I belong to a couple different groups here locally in Delaware, and I was telling my buddies that you guys are coming on the channel, and he was like, "Oh, Canadian." He's like, "What do you think about that?" I was like, "Well, I've already tried the whiskey; it's fantastic." I was like, "Honestly, I can give two craps. I don't care if they source their whiskey from Antarctica, as long as it's whiskey and it tastes great. Hey, I'm good, and I can find it. Which obviously finding it online is the easiest route. So for me, that's it's a no brainer, honestly." And I think it was Bull with my man Dirk. This is my buddy Dirk out in Philly. There's a huge presence of Philly folks here tonight. This is one of my buddies, Dirk, who lives in Philly. So he wants to know where can you find Found North in a store. So Dirk, I would say just go directly to foundnorthwhiskey.com and you can check online. But you can also buy it online as well, which is much easier as well. Either Sillbox and then Shared Pour, two different places. So that might even be easier than having to drive to. There are some stores, because I looked online, Dirk. There are some stores in like the Jersey area, but save your gas money, Dirk. It's too expensive with gas money. Just go online and shop, honestly. So much easier. Chris Bruno. Appreciate you, Chris. Terrence, thanks as well. Terrence said he wants to get batch 4 stat. I hear you. Or Coop, I hear you. All right. Speaking of batch 4, I love 3, but let's move on to 4. We're getting closer to my favorite, by the way, which I'm not going to say which one that is until later. But I'm going to pour a little bit more of 4. Just a smidge more. All right. Woo.
Oh, I love 4.
Yeah. So 4 is kind of like the same thing, because this one, the youngest age is 18 years, which is represented by the label 18 years. But there's actually whiskey in here all the way blended up to 25 years. 25 years. Damn.
Yeah, actually, most of this only 20% of the whiskey was 18 years old. Most of it was 21 and 25-year-old whiskeys.
Wow.
And actually the 25-year was aged in Hungarian oak. So David Gallup was asking about the barrels that they use in Canada, which is a great question. They do a lot of stuff in refill barrels. We try to buy more interesting finishes when we can. And we've actually started to do a lot of our own recasking because we want our components to have a little bit more barrel influence than what they're kind of used to up in Canada.
Yeah.
And Hungarian oak is cool. It's a little tighter grained,
Okay.
so it doesn't get as kind of dry and acrid as
Okay.
if you put something in new American oak for 25 years. It'll throw some interesting flavors, but
Yeah.
it's going to be like, pencil shavings for sure. You're
Yep.
going to get kind of that bitter, overly oaked. I won't name names, but there's a there are a few brands that came out with some stuff that like 26, 28 years old in the last few years.
Yeah.
Bourbons.
Hmm.
I can't drink this stuff. It's just too. I don't know. Anyway, but Hungarian oak doesn't do the same thing. It
So it's a
because it's
different
tighter
impact.
grain.
It
Yeah, it
does.
just doesn't get there, but it gives you a ton of wood sugar.
Okay.
And so your kind of classic caramel notes that you'd expect from American oak
Yeah.
start manifesting more as like thick, rich molasses.
Yeah.
Um,
For sure.
and
Okay.
and that's for us. That was really what we were going for. Is if you're used to drinking bourbon,
Yeah.
we don't want to live right in the smack dab in the middle of that palette. We want to be kind of dancing around on the edges. So it's familiar, but it's got some originality to it. It's got some sort of uniqueness to it, and it's not just another thing that's going on your shelf that tastes like the other stuff on your shelf.
Nick, this right here is just straight up delicious. Oh my
Thank you.
gosh. Oh
Thank you.
man.
Thank you.
This is damn good. Folks, you guys know me, and I always keep it real. There's some whiskeys that are great, some whiskeys that are good, and some whiskeys that you don't even want them on the shelf. This is in a great category. This batch
Thank you.
4 is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Oh my
Thank you.
gosh.
Thank you.
Oh man, I
Yeah.
can't even it's so good. This is insane. So Jim has a fantastic question. Jim wants to know what's in store for 2023. So I assume you're probably thinking,
Yeah.
Jim, like batches, like that's something that kind of comes to mind for me as well. Do you and your brother have like a set schedule in terms of like the number of batches you want to release per year, or what's happening for 2023 for Found North Whiskey?
Yeah. So it's funny because you basically like in the industry we call it OND, or now
Yeah.
it's called SOND, which is
Okay.
just September, October, November, December,
Yeah.
and so much of the so much of the sales of whiskey happens in that period of time. And so really like when you're a brand, you're kind of just cranking. You've hopefully finished all your product and you're just kind of cranking until December 24, and then it kind of everything shuts down.
Yeah. End of the year.
And right. And so then January rolls around and you're hungover in all manners of that word. And you have to like suddenly you got to get on your horse and start planning
Planning.
what
What the hell are we gonna
what
do
you're
this
gonna
year?
make. Yeah, and you're already late. It's
Yeah.
like it's the worst. But that effectively my job. So I'm the head blender.
Okay.
Which you would think like, oh, so all you do all day is blend whiskey, and
Yeah.
that's not it at all. Actually, the guy who's in the lab kind of blending all day is Sammy Karachi, who's our director of whiskey innovation.
Okay.
And
Oh, cool.
and so what we, even as a small brand, what we have is we have a brand strategy and what we'd like to release and what makes sense for our supply and what
Sure.
people are liking. And then of course there's what is actually good, right?
Yeah.
Like
That's true.
it's one thing to have an idea, but whiskey doesn't always cooperate that way.
Correct.
You need to get it to actually
To work.
work.
To blend
So
together. You're right. That's a good point. You're right. You
right,
might in your mind, it might sound like great. Like let's
sounds
blend
great, right? We're
X,
gonna
Y,
do
and
this,
Z, and
this,
then we
this,
can
and we're gonna have
do
a
it.
15-year, and it's gonna be this, and then you
Yep.
try to blend it, and you're like, yeah, it was great in concept, but it
Yep.
actually has to taste good. Um,
Indeed.
my job is to make those two things work together,
Okay.
right? Is
Okay.
to be really the bridge. And so I'll say, all right, Sammy, let's try making this. Let's see what this is. Let's see where we're going with this. And we are really in the middle of that process right now. We are deep in the middle of that process. We want to expand the range a little bit. So far we've done batches and we've done a handful of single barrels.
Single barrels here and
And
there.
they've all been kind of similar price ranges and similar age ranges. Outside of batch 5 is kind of a weird little exception.
Sure.
But we want to kind of really diversify what we're making. And so for us, we're certainly going to do another set of single barrels They will be fundamentally different from the first set. So the first set we did was season 1. We called it was rye was a blend of 12-year and 19-year rye with 21-year corn that we then recast into a bunch of barrels for a year and then released.
Wow.
We're going to do, it will not be the same original formula. We're completely different single
Changing
barrels.
up. Okay.
Yep. So that'll be really fun. We have we have a super old release that I'm not allowed to talk about. That's going to come out later this year.
All right.
Which
so hold on,
I'm really excited about.
There. When should we be maybe somewhat kind of glued to Found North Whiskey's website? Roughly, give us like a 60-day range.
Honestly, we do a bunch of we're gonna do a bunch of like online only releases that you can only find out about at our mailing list. So for us, what like as a blending house, we don't have some big distillery gift shop, right?
Yeah.
So like we can't do gift shop releases. And if you've ever done a pilgrimage to Kentucky, it's like one of the coolest aspects of the whole thing. And so we're really bummed. And so we're like, all right, how do we create our own kind of gift shop only releases? So we do that as like, we do that as through our mailing list. So like, if you go to foundnorthwhiskey.com and you just go to the bottom, you can sign up. And when we announce a single barrel or a special release, so we'll do a bunch of special releases this year that are going to be exclusively through our mailing list. And then we're going to try to diversify the product mix a little bit, get some sort of a little bit more variability in age range and price point. So
that's cool. No, I appreciate that. That's awesome. Well,
what that'll exactly be, we're literally in development right now.
You're planning right now. That's all right. Hey, it's good to know. At least you are still, finding something for your dedicated, consumer base, right? So Mrs. Judge, because I know she's always helping me as one of my mods, as one of my wrenches, please make sure you add us to the mailing list for Found North Whiskey, please.
Please.
That and some bottles I'll have to end the mind after this live stream too. I have a few that are already in queue. She just doesn't know that yet, but hopefully I don't land on the couch. Copper Wolf, I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Copper Wolf, Ryan. That is a very true statement. There's always one dog in the bar. Indeed. What do we got here? Let's see. I'm just kind of taking a look to see what everyone else is discussing and asking. There's a lot of Philly folks in the chat. So maybe Nick, let's break away from whiskey for a second. Let's tell everyone your football team, just so everyone knows a little bit more about Nick.
No, not in a room full of Philly fans, man. I would. They've still got a number on me. Yeah, no, we're all from our whole team's all from New England. I know. It's like, it's funny when we're in New York, we don't tell people we're from Boston. Yeah, we're like, oh yeah, we're Found North. We're sourcing Canadian whiskey, and we never say, oh yeah, but we're from Boston. No, it's a good way to lose sales.
Yep. I love that. So Jim, this is actually a great question. So Jim, Jim stated that, we're seeing a lot of large brands starting to kind of positive results like with stay finishes. Anything that you think might be of interest like in that realm for Found North?
I think we would definitely experiment with it. For us, the cool thing about the barrel program is we get to try a lot of things, and kind of we can test things at a very small scale, and if it doesn't work out, we can blend it again, right? And fortunately, we didn't have to do that a lot last year. Most of what we did for finishes worked out. We'll certainly try that. For now, what we really focus on is there's effectively there are two ways to do a barrel finish. You either get a wet cask or a charred cask, and that can be a rechar cask, right?
Yep.
And so effectively, if you're doing a rechar cask where you're stripping the char from the previous fill and cooking the barrel again, the previous spirit doesn't matter nearly as much, right? It does matter because it matters how it affected the wood chemistry. Sure. But in a lot of ways, like, you've lost a lot of whatever the previous spirit was.
Yep.
A wet cask is the opposite, right? Like a wet cask, you can have. We did a single barrel that we finished in an Ardbeg cask. It was
Really?
freaking amazing. Yeah, it was a special release for the retailer that I actually started my career in here in
Okay.
Boston, Gordon's.
Okay.
And Kenny Gordon is an Ardbeg nut. And so
Okay.
when we got our hands on, but when we got the Ardbeg cask, it had standing liquid in it, right? Like when you
Wow.
get a wet cask, you are getting so
You
much of the
truly are.
previous spirit. You
From the
really are getting
previous.
previous
You
spirit.
really are.
Uh,
Okay.
and so
Okay.
for us, we've been mostly experimenting with, we either are looking for a specific type of wood type, if it's a D-char, rechar,
Yeah.
or a charred new oak, right? So like
Yeah.
we did plenty of new oak stuff. Um,
Okay.
or we're looking for very specific a different wet cast. So like port is great, right?
Yeah. Port
Port
goes,
and
I mean,
whiskey.
phenomenal. I mean, for
Uh,
rye, for bourbon, I mean, it doesn't even matter.
Oh, for me
Literally, right?
particularly rye. Like
Yeah,
port and rye is just ridiculous because it's you get that kind of peppery spice
you do.
with like
It's
the chocolate and red fruit of
the
port, and
chocolate
it's
and like those red notes.
freaking,
Absolutely.
it's so to die for.
It
So
really
we
is.
we love that. We love
Yeah.
that. We've done a few of those. We'll do a few more of those.
All right.
And so that's what we've been focusing on. But there's
Okay.
no question, if somebody came to us and said, "Hey, we can do," if a cooperage said, "Hey, we can do this where we can take some French oak and we can put some staves in and we can do this and
Yeah.
that," we'd listen.
You're open to it.
Yeah,
You're
oh,
open
we'd
to it.
listen.
And that says a
Yeah.
lot, I mean, about your brand. At least you guys are open to it, because there are definitely some brands that would say flat out, no, like give them the Heisman, right? Like that's not for us. So at least you guys are open to it, which is cool. I respect that. I like that. Danny, what's going on, Danny? Always good to see you, man. Good to see you, Danny. Ron Edwards, Cigar Boss. So Ron has a good question for you. So it looks like he wants to
I
know,
love this question.
other than Found North, what are some of your favorites? And he asked you about the Reddit
Yeah,
challenge.
for sure.
We'll give you one or two or three. We'll hit you with all five.
I wish so for me, I wish the Reddit challenge would change slightly, because my one of my favorite kind of whiskey games that it started with there's a whiskey writer who's local to Boston who we've known forever, and when we go to his house for dinner,
Okay.
we hypothesize the whiskey apocalypse, right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
you
Oh, boy.
are the god of whiskey, and you can save a
Yeah.
finite number of distilleries, 6 distilleries, right, around the world.
All right. Okay.
And what do you save? And then
What
we
are you
have
saving?
these heated debates about
Yeah.
what we're saving. For me, it changes all the time, because I sit there and I'm like, I started as a Scotch nut, so I got to save a couple Scotch distilleries, but which ones? And do I save Chichibu? Do I save any of the sort of non-major guys? I probably have to save one of the big Canadian distilleries.
Of course.
Like it's always.
Yeah.
So it can get really tough. But for me to sort of specifically answer Ron's question,
Yeah.
bourbons and ryes that I love. All right, so Four Roses,
Four Roses.
really close to my heart.
Okay.
I think not only do I think they make great whiskey, but Brent Elliott is the man.
Yeah.
Brent Elliott is a good dude,
Indeed.
and
Totally agree.
Taught me a ton about how to blend and how whiskey works, and
Okay.
really they're quietly, and they don't talk about this, but they're quietly a blending company. They make 10 different types of whiskeys for the purpose of being able to blend
Correct. Constantly.
Yeah. And so I really admire what they do, and I think they make phenomenal whiskey. I've got in my bars back here, I've got like 15 Four Roses single barrels open.
Oh, wow. So you're truly a Four Roses
I'm
fan.
like
You really are.
I'm a big fan of Four Roses.
You are. Okay. All right. Didn't know
I
that,
really
Nick.
I really love that. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then for me, I'm an old school 101 fan. Wild Turkey
Ooh.
101, baby,
Okay.
all day. I think that
Good
is
stuff.
a just slammable, delicious whiskey.
It is.
That has just longevity to it.
And it's so affordable, right? So affordable.
It's so affordable.
So affordable
Yeah.
for someone, that's like trying to enter into the whiskey game, and, and really, interested in whiskey. And I mean, you can't beat that price range. So that's great by itself.
Can't beat
It
the
really
price
is.
point. I love turkey. rye is harder for me.
Yeah.
I don't like a lot of I
Right.
don't like a lot of rye. It's part of the reason why I started making it.
Hey, nothing wrong with that.
No, I have a really hard time with it.
Yeah.
I was really early to Rendezvous Rye when it was a
Yeah.
16.6. It
Okay.
was 16-year blended with 6-year.
Oh
And
yeah.
I thought it just absolutely slapped when it first really came on the scene in
Okay.
2014.
Yeah.
I don't drink it as much anymore.
Okay.
Not because I think it's gone totally downhill. It just it when it first came out, I was like, this is ridiculous. This is
Yeah.
like outrageously good whiskey for $50 or whatever it
Sure.
was. You know, it's just like
Yeah.
um
And you
and
have your
then
own. I mean, now you're blending, making your own whiskey too. So at some
totally.
point, even though you love like Four Roses and the Rendezvous, it's like, hey,
It is hard to drink other stuff.
It is,
I
right? I
only
mean,
have
you have
so
to
much
sip your
liver
own stuff, right?
capacity.
It's tough. It's tough. I get it.
Yeah,
Trust me, I do.
but let's see, what else do I like? I'm a Peerless fan.
Oh, I do like Peerless. Yep, Corky and Tina do a great job.
I'm a Wilderness Trail fan.
Wilderness.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, and then I like some of the sort of classic Buffalo Trace releases, particularly like it's tough because you have to get it secondary or you have to get it in some blown up price,
I know.
which is shitty for their brand, right? Because
It is.
it
It
hurts
really
their
is.
reputation
It
when
really
they're
does.
putting out good stuff at a good competitive price.
So true. It
But if
does.
you kind of if you ignore the nonsense around the secondary market and that driving the prices and sort of making it really hard to get access to,
Yeah.
like Weller for me is an inspiration, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the WLW,
Mhm.
some of the old ones, some of the OGs, like the
Oh yeah.
2006, like oh
Just
my
flat out
god,
insane,
just
right?
flat out
I
ridiculous.
know.
And
I
I think the best American whiskey I ever had was the Michter's 2023. Sorry,
know.
2013. So the Michter's
Ooh.
2013, which was some really OG Stitzer Weller juice, was
Yeah.
just that slapped. Oh my
Wow.
god, that
I
was so
bet it
good stuff.
did. I bet it did. Oh my gosh. And there's a lot of great whiskey out there. I mean, if you're going even old school as well, which is cool. That you're absolutely right. Phil, I appreciate. Thanks, Phil Brickman, good old Saints fan. A lot of Saints. We have some
Some
Bills
Saints
fans in
fans
here as
up
well.
there.
I
I
know.
love
I
the
think,
Bills. I didn't say that out loud. I love the
dude.
Bills.
Oh my gosh, you can't
Dude, you
say
gotta
that
love
as
the
a
Bills.
Patriots fan.
No,
You
you
can't be
have to
like the
love the
Bills.
Bills.
That's not even allowed.
No, hold on, because the Bills, like, the Bills are the definition of not being bandwagon fans.
That's
Like,
true.
they have had decades of pain.
That's true. True.
They're like the Red Sox pre 2004, right? If
Yeah,
you were a Red Sox fan before they won in 2004, you just suffered for
that's so true.
years.
So true.
That's the Bills, and they're so legit. The Bills Mafia is so legit. Like
They
it's
are
hard
legit.
not
They are
to love
legit.
their fan base.
You know, you said something that I hope and pray one day I'll be able to say that the Raiders are actually a good team. I don't see it happening for the next 20 years. At that point, you might be putting out like 40-year-old Foul North whiskey.
I was doing a live stream during the last 5 minutes of the Raiders Patriots game this year.
Oh
And
God.
people like literally that people knew I was from Boston. They stopped the whole thing and they were like, "Did you see what happened with the game?" And I was like, "No, I thought it was about to go to overtime." And then they explained to me what happened. I was like, "What happened? This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard."
It's crazy. Raiders that we show up once in a blue moon. It's not often though.
Yeah,
Not
if we
often.
throw it to you for no reason whatsoever, and then you just
random
walk into
reason.
the end zone.
Indeed, indeed. Larry Abbott says he loves the fact that Americans are blending Canadian whiskeys. That is
Yes.
pretty damn funny, Larry. You're right, man. It really is. If you think about it, right? Seriously. That's too funny. We got David here from David DMC or DMCKY. David from Kentucky, also known as Prescription Bourbon. All right, so I got another question for you. So I think I want to go over to batch 5 before I ask my question. But let's go over to batch 5 real quick. I want to look at this one. Batch 5. So batch 5 technically says aged 8 years, but in theory, there's also 21-year-old corn whiskey in here as well, which is a lot. I mean, the majority of it, 73% of it, is 21-year-old whiskey. Oh, man.
Indeed.
I might be giving away my favorite, just so you know. Although 4 is pretty, to Terrence's point, 4 is pretty damn special. But batch 5, Oh man, I feel like the blends are just getting better. To be honest with you, I really do.
Oh man, I appreciate that. We're working on it. We it's funny because when I go through the blends, I always feel that. And then I drink one and two, and I remember like they're a little rougher around the edges, but God, they're good pours. And
Yeah,
but I think we've gotten cleaner. I think we've gotten cleaner with our blends.
yeah,
Less rough edges, a little bit. Things are fitting together a little better.
they are.
This this is so I think I thought I saw a question go by. Somebody asked what my favorite batch is.
Okay, yeah. What's
I
your favorite batch?
got it's like picking your favorite kid, and I don't even
Yeah.
have kids. And and like I think my favorite batch is probably batch one
Okay,
because
the
like
original.
dude, when we made the blend
Yeah,
and we just you're so in your own head about it, right? You're like, I think this is good, but I don't know. We have no reputation. And then like I remember I sent it to Lou Bryson, who was a former managing editor at Whiskey Advocate. He's written a
okay,
couple great books, and
sure, yeah.
I've known him forever. And I sent it to him, and he called me, and he just goes, Nick, this fucking rye is delicious. I was like, oh, you have this sense of just like, oh, I've done something. But in terms of just like flavor,
Yeah,
for me, I think it's batch five.
it's batch five. Batch five is so I'll give you guys know I always keep it real. It's one thing I always kind of pride like for my channel. Like every channel is different in the YouTube world and so forth. For me, it's just one thing. I always want to make sure people are clear on what I'm thinking. Batch four, I think is good. Batch six, I think is delicious. I think batch five is like this. Like I was so torn with like I wanted to finish this bottle when you sent me to me. I was like, yeah, I can finish it, and maybe Nick will send me another bottle. And I was like, you know what? I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't
I
ask him for
totally
another
would
bottle.
have.
It was that good. I was like, oh my gosh. I had to literally remove the bottle like from being in front of me. It was that good. Batch five. So Terrence, if you're looking for a bottle, you can buy 4 or 6, but 5, in my opinion, is by far the best. That is delicious. Flat
So
out.
you want to talk like when I wasn't kidding when I said Weller's an inspiration. Like for me, the really cool thing about this was it we found a wheat component that was really amazing.
Yeah.
Um and we found a wheat component that was incredible. It was 8 years old, all in new American oak, and just absolutely popped. And it had so much wheat and so much of that like buttery, kind of almost minty
Yeah.
cinnamon bomb, right? Just like everything I love about wheat.
Sure.
We laid it on top of 21-year-old corn, so we got all of like the aged bourbon effect.
Correct.
Also aged mostly in new American oak. So this thing
Yeah.
is a new American oak sort of, and the creaminess and the butteriness really shows in that. And that's for me, that's like a cheat, right? Because a lot of times if you age an American wheater long enough to get that kind of old foundation,
Yeah.
you lose a lot of the wheat grain that makes it a wheater.
Correct.
But if you bottle a wheater young, it's too rough.
It is
And
to
so
buy
this
itself,
thing
it's
was
rough.
like, oh God, I felt like it was just so fun to make this whiskey.
I bet it was. I would love to be there with you guys when you guys are blending. So if you guys ever need, even though I'm not a big fan of the Boston area, but if you ever need me to come up to the Boston area, I think I can sacrifice and make the trip up.
Come on up. I got an extra bedroom upstairs. You are more than welcome.
Awesome. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it.
And dude, Mrs. Bourbon Judge is also welcome. And my wife is an amazing cook, and I'm very good at cleaning up after her.
Oh, that's awesome. Even better. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. Thank you. So Jim has a really good question. So Jim's question is, do you guys ever make a blend that just, is like an epic fail or just a fail and like, just can't do it? And what happened in that case? That's a good question, by the way, Jim. Jim's dropping like all like the fantastic questions tonight, by the way.
No, that's a fantastic question, Jim. I would say effectively when we make blends, we start getting a concept. So we'll blend a few different things a few different components together, and you start getting a concept, and we all the time we have code names for them, not because we're trying to be secretive, but because
Yeah.
it's really annoying to be like, okay, the blend that is 20% this, 40% this, 15% this, it's like, rather you just name it. And then, so we're like, all right, this is, what we had one whiskey, actually batch 3 originally was called Snowflake. And so we are like, all right, so
Ooh,
Snowflake, all right, we've got
snowflake.
Snowflake. What are we doing with Snowflake? And what will happen is we start tweaking it. And a lot of times you'll say, it's not like the tasting notes, right? When I
Yeah.
nose this and I give you tasting notes,
Mhm.
blending's not like that. I'm not like, oh, this has this buttercream note that we've blended with this rich
Correct.
bullshit, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's much more, does it have enough sweetness? Does it have
yeah.
enough wood? Does it have enough body? How's
Like
the
truly
texture?
well
It's
rounded across the
very,
board.
yes. And a
Yeah.
lot of times what will happen is we'll like some aspect of this, whiskey,
Okay.
and we'll say like, all right, this is what we like about it, but here's something we want to change.
Yeah.
And we'll start tweaking the ratios to try to change it. And a lot of times what happens is, to fix one issue or to enhance one quality,
Mhm.
you lose what you liked about it originally.
Ah, okay. I
And
see that.
so we will go
I see that.
back and we'll tweak and tweak and tweak. And you go down this path and that path and this path with the blend. And we'll get to a point where we'll go, hey, we got to put this down. It's not working.
Yeah.
And we
You
just
do. So that
move
truly
on to
happens
that.
sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It
Yeah.
does. Okay.
Yeah,
That has to be
absolutely.
hard, when especially if you've
It's
invested
brutal.
time, effort, and money, right? Because time is money in business, right? I know that
Yes.
from my day
Yes,
job.
sir.
Time is money. So that's hard when you have to put something down. Like, you know what? I can't make this better in some cases. So that's a tough one.
It's happened a lot.
Jim boy, damn, Jim, you have the questions. I
Yeah.
love it, man. I love it. So whiskey, whiskey guy says, Judge, what do you say? I got love for you, Bourbon Judge, but no Raiders.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with Raiders fans. I think the Raiders fans are probably
It's
they're
tough.
not sensitive. They're
It's tough.
passionate.
They're passionate, very passionate, very passionate. Oh man, it's too funny.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
Lou Bryson introduced him to Found North. Ah, okay. All right, David. All right. Pretty
Lou
cool.
Bryson's book Tasting Whiskey
Yeah.
is the book to understand the fundamentals of whiskey. I
Sure.
believe I've gone through 3 copies of it.
You
Just
really?
like
Oh,
I've
wow.
gone through so many times that like eventually it starts falling apart. I
Okay.
have referenced that book more than anything.
Wow. That's awesome, man. That is really cool. That is pretty cool. So I got a question for you. So one thing I loved on your website is that you guys are truly committed to bringing forth the best quality whiskey, right? And we're about to get to batch 6 in a little bit, even though I could probably stay all night on batch 5, but I'm gonna be a big boy and move over to batch 6 soon. Do you think that it would ever make sense to look at, let's call it younger? When I say young, it's funny to saying this, younger whiskey that's like aged 10 years, same concept, but at a cheaper price point, right? Because a lot of your whiskey MSRP, it's not bad, honestly, being the fact that some of it goes up to 25 years, is only $115, $120, which I think is very reasonable for the age of it. But do you think at any point, does it make sense for Found North, and it doesn't have to, but does it make sense to offer like a similar type of an approach, but maybe like age 10 years, age 12 years, blended whiskey, but at a cheaper price point for some of those people that might be a bit more budget conscious, to say, you know
Yeah.
what? Okay, I'll grab that online, or I'll buy that online
Totally.
because that's in my price point. What are your thoughts, Nick?
Oh God, yeah. This is the topic at Found North right now.
Okay.
We want, particularly because it is much easier to buy something like Found North or anything that's in that I'd say north of $100 range.
Yeah.
If you get a chance to taste it, you go to a seminar, you sit
Correct.
down, you hear about the brand, you buy into it, you taste the whiskey, you like it, you buy it, right?
Mhm.
In an online world where that's a lot of faith to drop $135 on a bottle or something like that. You know what I mean? Like you really
Yeah,
need to feel a degree of trust around the brand, around the person who's recommending it. And
correct.
I get it that is hard to pull the trigger.
Sure.
We would love to make something in the sub 100 range, and
Yeah.
our single barrels did it as best as we could.
Okay.
which the SRP was $99.99. We were trying
Okay.
to get it a little, and it was a little bit younger whiskey, and we've been sourcing some components that are a little bit younger. But
Yeah.
honestly, for us, like we are a follow the whiskey brand. It is
Okay.
something you will see in our copy. It is something you will hear me say, and it is something that we absolutely swear by. We'll
Yeah.
never make our cost model or our brand concept or our product mix get in the way of, is this liquid good?
Correct. Right.
And is
Which is
the
fair.
and good, by the way, is 100% relative to value, right?
Correct.
So like we when we released batch 5, for us there's a bit of faith in the consumer because it's an 8. We've released 2 16 years, a 17-year,
Mm-hmm.
2 18 years,
Mm-hmm.
and an 8-year.
And the 8 year.
And
Yep.
they're all pretty close to the same price,
Yeah. They
right?
are. They are.
Like you need to we have a lot of faith that people like you are going to taste batch 5 and
Yeah.
just go, shit, screw the age.
Yeah.
Like this thing is so good, it's worth it.
It
Because
is.
we price our whiskey based on what it costs us to make it.
Yeah.
We don't sit here going, oh, it's an 8-year, so we have to sell it at $65. We
Correct.
can't do that. We
Yeah.
sold it at what we can literally afford to sell it at.
Understood.
So for us, yes, we're dying to find liquid that we think really is good,
Okay.
that matches the price point, matches the age, matches the value, that
Yeah.
we feel really proud about putting Found North on the bottle.
On the bottom. And that's probably
If
the
we
most important thing, I would
That's
assume,
it.
like making sure that the whiskey is fantastic, even if there is a sounds like that you guys are potentially open to doing some different types of batches in the future. But as long as the
Totally.
whiskey, the quality is solid, then and you can put your label on it, then that says it all.
Totally. And
Yeah.
I think for us, like we're working on it. We really are, because
You are.
we want to have some degree of accessibility, even
Okay.
if it's $100, even if
Yeah.
it's $100,
Absolutely.
like that is really, there's a mental thing about when it gets over $100, and we
There
know
is.
that,
There
and we
is.
understand that,
For sure.
and we want people to be able to experience Found North at a lower price point,
Yep.
but not at the cost of
Diluting the quality of the whiskey.
yeah.
That's it. I hear you, man.
That's
I
it.
hear you. I hear you. All right. So Anthony has a good question. And Anthony, I know Nick talked a little bit about future batches, but I don't know if he said or can say specifically batch 7 is going to be a rye, but we'll ask Nick. What are your thoughts, Nick, on batch 7?
I don't think
Anthony
so.
wants to know.
I don't think it's going to be a rye.
Okay.
We've had we've had such a positive response to all our corn dominant whiskey. 4, 5, and 6 have all been majority corn.
Okay.
And in a way, it's kind of become our signature to make these sort of corn dominant Canadian whiskeys.
Yeah.
And we're going to do that, and then we'll sprinkle in rye. So it's not like we're going to stay away from rye, but
Okay.
the truth is, the truth is that conceptually people love rye, but
Yeah.
what people buy is corn.
Yeah.
Like
True.
it's true.
It's valid. I mean, you're right. It's a valid statement. It really is.
And I'll tell you, like, people think, oh, rye is this incredibly fast moving category, right?
Yep.
It's the fastest growing category.
Mhm.
Yeah, by percentage. If
Yeah.
you look at like where it was in 2000, there were under 100,000 cases sold in the US in 2000. In 2020, there was like 1.7 million cases sold, something like that.
Correct.
Guess what? There was 20 million cases of bourbon sold. There are like 12, 13 times as many people who or consumption of corn-based products versus rye-based products. And so it's tough for us to keep making rye when the corn sells, and we gotta do what we're good at, and what people are really liking from us.
Yep, absolutely. So Jim, I think Jim was responding to your comment, your last comment about if you did the question I asked you about looking at other, price points that might be
Yes.
slightly lower than where you're at. So yeah, that was a great answer, Jim. Completely agree. See what else we had. Another question up here as well. So Anthony, you asked Anthony about North Carolina. So Anthony, I don't think when I saw online at foundnorthwhiskey.com, I don't believe I saw North Carolina. I think Florida might be the closest to you for a physical presence, like location, but shared pour seal box, if shared pour or seal box ships to North Carolina, which I'm not sure, honestly, I don't live in North Carolina, but if they do, then you should be covered by looking at either sealbox.com or sharedpour.com.
I think uh, uh, I don't remember if I don't remember. I'm looking it up right now. Actually, I have it right here. No, I don't believe that even the sort of big online players can ship to North Carolina. North Carolina is a little bit like Illinois.
Okay.
It's kind of just like nobody touches it.
No one touches
and then on top of it, I actually went to Davidson, so I went to school in North Carolina, and
You went to
so
Davidson?
yeah.
UNC Charlotte guy right here.
Oh, let's go. What's
Woo!
up?
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
See,
I love
that's the reason
that.
why we have a bond. It was
I
natural,
know.
man.
Oh, it's totally natural. Yes, yeah. So
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
so I'm well aware of the ABC situation there.
Yeah,
It is a control state, and it is a hard state to get into as a brand, and
yeah,
it is a nightmare to ship into. So
it
I
is. Okay.
apologize, Anthony.
That's okay.
I want it
That's
there.
fair.
I want it there. We're working on it.
That's fair. No, that's completely fine. So, Nick,
Yep.
a lot of people enter trying new brands at like bars, restaurants, and so forth. So, I know Steven's asking specifically in this question about samples and so forth, which most brands don't really do a lot of samples, but like, is your brand starting to kind of expand into like bars and restaurants across the US in various different markets, or what does that kind of look like from that perspective?
Yeah. So, all right. So, as to sample sets are tricky for us because, like, we were able to get 3 barrels of the wheat that made batch 5. So
Yeah.
we were able to make, like, I think it was 2,072 bottles of it,
Okay.
and it won't last. And
Yeah.
so creating a whole nother SKU, which, by the way, sample sets are really expensive because it's weird to say this, but the glass is incredibly expensive.
It is. It
So
is.
it's like it's very hard to make sample sets of things that we then are not going to have any more of. So we're like, really, we love the idea of sample sets conceptually.
Yeah.
And if we make something that is a little more regularly available,
Mhm.
if we came out with a 12 year or whatever, something that we made every year and was regularly available, we
Mhm.
definitely would start doing it in different formats so that people could buy it at a cheaper price and see if they like it.
Yep.
As far as bars and restaurants, bars and restaurants are tricky. One problem that we have with bars and restaurants is they don't know how to put us on a menu.
Okay.
It's a
Ah,
funny thing because
because
no one will find us in Canadian and know what they're expecting, and
correct.
nobody will put us in an American
The
whiskey
American
section.
whiskey because of the whole yeah. Oh, yeah, you're
Yeah,
right. Oh,
so it's like
man.
there's a logistics challenge with bars and restaurants. We have not targeted bars and restaurants unless they come to us.
Okay, okay. So
If
that's an
they come
interesting
and
one.
they
You're
say,
right.
"Hey, we want Found North," sure.
You're right.
Um, so I think the big one is the really cool one that we're in for New York City folks. We're in
Okay.
Flatiron Room.
Oh, you
Flatiron
are?
Room is freaking awesome. It's one of my favorite places, and I believe
Yeah.
they're offering a flight of 3, 4, 5, and 6 right now.
Ah, okay. So I know where that is. It's not too far from my day job, if you will, which is right downtown in Manhattan in New York.
Oh,
Okay,
cool.
that's good to know. All right,
Yeah, yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Cool, cool. Very nice, very nice. Um, so Copper Wolf wants to know. This is actually a good question, man. Copper Wolf, you're coming through as well. So Ryan wants to know: are we ever going to see a release that is more dominant from a wheat grain perspective? Interesting question, Ryan.
Do like a wheat whiskey.
Yeah, like a
Um,
wheat whiskey kind of a thing.
we've fiddled with it. We've fiddled with it. The wheat components that we've worked with so far are I'll just say straight up, they're rough.
Okay.
The thing about blending is a lot of times people say that blending is folks will say like, oh, blending is about hiding things, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, like as if you've got a flaw.
Sure.
And that's sure. There are brands that do that, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we screwed this up. We
Yeah.
made this thing that has this literal flaw in it. And we know that if we put it into our lowest, our highest volume, lowest price thing, you're not going to notice it, which is
Yeah.
true. There are brands
Yeah.
that do that. But really blending is much more like cooking. And when you cook, like if you use too much pepper, you will ruin
You will.
the meal, right?
You will.
Like it's
Absolutely.
pretty straightforward.
It is.
So
I mean, you have to add some seasoning, but not too much, right?
right. And the wheat that we've had, it's like way too explosive in certain flavors
Yeah.
to be the dominant character to sort of be the main feature of a dish. It's been much easier to sprinkle it in. Even frankly, 27% is still pretty high relative like to American wheaters. You're
It
usually
is.
talking like 12, 15%. 27
You're-
is like really getting into the wheat pretty
Yep.
heavily outside of straight up wheat whiskeys.
Yep, you're absolutely right. I agree with you. That's actually a really good point. I think the 27% is actually a really good mark across the board, which is what batch 5 is. So I think it's a good blend. And you're right. I mean, you never want to just, to your point, I think earlier in our conversation, you never want to sacrifice again, which I think I don't want to call, I will not call out any brands, but you don't want to sacrifice quality just to say, you know what, I have a wheat whiskey that I can put out, right? I mean, can you do it? Sure, but you might sacrifice the quality. So let's not do that, right? So I think that says a lot. All right, so I know we're over an hour here,
Batch
and
6.
I know Mrs. Judge, we have her and I have some plans this evening as well. So we're going to go ahead and move over to batch 6. But while we move to batch 6, we're also going to do a quick drawing real quick. So and thanks by the way, Zoolander, really appreciate it, man. Thanks so much. Yeah, this was a fantastic session, Nick. You are, by the way, let me just say, Nick, you are always welcome back, brother. Anytime. Back. I only do live streams typically like once a month, maybe twice here and there. But for you, man, you guys are always welcome to come back, man. You're more than welcome. Whatever you want, man. Seriously.
Great crowd too. It's always I love getting. We've had some amazing questions all night. I appreciate everybody. Yeah, sorry. Indeed. Go ahead. Do the drawing.
We're gonna do the drawing. So Mrs. Judge, for the we have 2 sets of mini Glens. Mrs. Judge, if you can drop a name in, and while we're waiting for Mrs. Judge to do the drawing, and then she's do the little spinner offline. Anthony Peter says, actually, a really good question. Actually, Anthony wants to know, what about an oat or rice whiskey? Ooh, interesting, Anthony. Wow, you guys are great tonight with these questions. Damn.
Yeah, technically anything that I love telling people, any cereal grain that you can brew into a beer, you can technically distill into a whiskey, including oats, rice, sorghum. I've tasted a few interesting ones, just because when you're a whiskey buyer at a retail shop, like you're tasting. For us, sometimes I was tasting all week, 10 things a day, right? 10 different things. It was just crazy how much stuff would come in.
Yeah.
I never came across I never really came across any of the really the sort of out there grains that struck me, that where I was like, oh my goodness, this is different and out of this world. Sure. And to be honest with you, Anthony, I think part of that is, taste is very referential, right? Like I remember a few years ago, a single malt came out that won Whiskey Advocate's single malt of the quarter or something. It wasn't the big thing, but it was some award, and I got an opportunity to taste it, and it didn't taste like any single malt I had ever had. Okay. And that wasn't a good thing or a bad thing. Yeah. What I mean by that is, like, if chocolate tastes like not chocolate, and then you ask me how I like said chocolate, it's really hard. If I can't compare it to other chocolates, it's really hard for me to give it any sense of like, this is how I feel about this thing, right? This is That's true. And so if you drink a whiskey that tastes like vodka or tastes like brandy or tastes completely out there, it's really hard for me to be a judge of it. One whiskey that I is so in that spectrum for me is, I
Hmm.
don't know if you've ever had Bren single malt.
I have not. That's one I have not
Bren
had.
single malt, French single malt.
French. Okay.
Um, and I love Allison. I love the maker. She's a phenomenal person. And I think the whiskey's fascinating and really interesting if you like brandy.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it just, but if you ask me, how do you compare this single malt to, like, how do you, it compares more to like a Calvados. You know what I
It
mean?
does. Okay.
It tastes completely, and so it's
Just
really difficult for
different.
me to say, like, I really like this. And
Yeah.
so with the oat and the rice and the sorghum and all these different interesting grains that are used, they get so far outside of what I know and like about whiskey that it is
Sure.
incredibly difficult for
Difficult to
me,
like to put your brand behind something that you're not as
that I
familiar with.
just, I don't know. Like, yeah, okay, it's good in its own very unique way, but
Correct.
it gets outside of this pantheon that I'm used to and that I understand.
Correct. For Found North. That makes sense. It does.
Maybe
It
I'm
does
too
for sure.
narrow-minded. I don't know.
It
I
does.
maybe I got to broaden my perspectives.
No, no, no. I mean, hey, I think at the end of the day, though, you have to kind of stay true to what Found North is all about, right? And if even if something is, I've tasted a lot of different whiskeys that I think are great, but I don't know if they are great for me as the bourbon judge, like something that I would kind of go back to time after time. Is it unique by itself? Sure, it is great, but is it a bottle that like for example, for me, batch five, even actually honestly even six too, but particular batch five is something that my buddy Dirk, who's online, a guy from Philly, like this is one where like when he comes over, I'm like, you know what? This is the bottle you need to try like ASAP, like now, right? Where there are some other, rice grain back, let's call them whiskeys that are good, but I don't know if I would be as excited to say, hey, you want to try this? Like it might not work for for the brand.
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying. I really do. I do for sure. Gone Fishing is on. Cheers. Yep, absolutely for sure. Jim says, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Yeah, no, Nick, honestly, man, like I said, man, you are welcome back, brother.
Oh, thank you,
Anytime,
man.
dude. Anytime, man. This is
Thank you.
one of my favorite live streams I've ever had. And
Oh,
even though
good.
we're wrapping up, man. I love this. I can keep going forever. So, but I'm gonna get you back to Mrs. Taylor. I don't want Mrs. Taylor to be mad at Mr. Judge, so I'm gonna get you back. But all right, so Mrs. Judge is in. We have our first winner, which is we're not going too far. So David Gallup, awesome. So David, please reach out to me, David. Just reach out on my website, thebourbonjudge.com, and just shoot me your address, and I'll get the first item to you. So congrats. All right, Mr. Judge, let's go to our second item, if you don't mind. And I think Copper Wolf had another comment here. Said, very good answer, Nick. He respects your answer. Yep, I get that. Yep. You definitely want to jeopardize quality for sure. Completely agree. Completely agree, Ryan. Absolutely. What else we have here? I'm just kind of going down the line. See what else we have here.
I watched Rounders again the other night. That's a favorite kind of cult movie. I see Teddy KGB's in the house and bought his first bottle of Found North. I appreciate that.
Ah, sweet. Very nice. Very nice. That's
little,
awesome.
little classic movie reference in there. Big
That's
fan.
cool. That is pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Well, when I first heard the name Found North, I was like, this kind of reminds me of like Game of Thrones. I'm like, I'm like, is there some connection here?
Hilariously, we've not. I guess it makes sense, but we've done really, like, all the northern states. There hasn't been a northern state in the U.S. that hasn't reached out to us independently wanting to carry Found North.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
yeah.
cool.
Like there's like Minnesota, Washington, Oregon. Like we're in a bunch of these states that they're all in the north, and they love to buy Found North. It's delightful.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And kind of moving over from the north, but hey, Charles, you're right. I saw when I was looking at Found North's website as well. So Nick's website, Southern California, you can definitely find it in stores for sure. I mean, and I love your website. Very straightforward. Yep. It is.
Yes.
Very straightforward.
Store finders are useful.
Yeah, indeed. The boy with the pour, my man, Dirk. Yeah, I mean, Dirk, I didn't leave a lot left for you of batch 5 here, but don't worry. I will say, don't worry. I'm ordering a bottle of batch 5 like literally tonight, while I'm hanging out with Mrs. Judge on the couch watching TV, batch 5 is going to be in my inbox literally tonight for sure. That's how good it is. And you guys know me. I I hold nothing back when it comes to whiskey that I love. So all right. So who is our next winner? Let's see. Let me go back real quick. See, Mrs. Judge. I think we have it. Is it Jim Matthews? Okay. So Jim Matthews is our second winner of the Bourbon Judge Mini Glens. Congrats, Jim. Very nice. Very nice. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So let's wrap up real quick, Nick. So last thing for you, Nick. So batch 3, 4, 5, 6, absolutely amazing. Each and every one, honestly. I mean, I like them. It's almost like I like them almost in order, except for 5. 5 was just a special place in my heart. Anything that is coming for Found North that you say, you know what, hey, everyone, Judge community, be on the lookout for X. Anything that we should know that we should be on the lookout for. You gave us one key item earlier. You said, the mailing list. What else do you have for us, Nick, as we wrap
up? We were doing we had a holiday release that we were working on. And it, you want to talk about following the whiskey, the barrel just kept getting better. And so we were like, no, we're not bottling this yet because it's just getting better and it's getting better and it's getting better. We finally bottled it. We're about to release it. It is a mailing list only single barrel. It's a sherry butt. It's a Pedro Jimenez sherry butt. I know someone mentioned earlier that they missed out on single barrel 1. It sold out in 12 minutes. Wow. So I apologize. So one of the reasons we did a sherry butt was because sherry butts are huge. So hopefully it'll sell out in an hour instead of 12 minutes because God, we had a lot of upset people. But people literally, I got emails being like, yo, there was also a problem with the mail server. So we had scheduled it for 2 and it sold it it came out, the email didn't land till 2:05 and then sold out by 2:17, and people were like, I checked it too. I went and took a call and came back at 2:20 and your shit was sold out, man. And I was just like, I am sorry. We had no idea this would happen. But seriously, that's the thing I'm sort of most excited. That's locked and loaded and ready to go. Yeah.
I like that. All right, that's good to know. Well, thank you for that bit of advice. We appreciate it. So Charles brings up a good point. He was just kind of hitting up Michael. Yeah, I personally, I mean, I don't mind going to the store, but if I can get something online, I'm not going to leave my house, honestly. I mean, between traffic and just with work and so my day job, just honestly, for me, it's just easier to go directly online. I mean, I was online earlier today, Charles, to your point, at Shared Pour, and I saw that's where I'm getting my batch 5 from. So for me personally, so there you go. I mean, I don't have to hunt for it. I don't have to go to a store. I don't have to drive the nonsense with all that, and so forth. So just directly online for sure.
Shared Pour did an R bourbon single barrel pick that sold out. That also sold out almost instantaneously. But they did a Sauternes pick that was incredible. And then Jay went absolutely ham and just bought a ton of Found North for Shared Pour and has been selling it at just delightfully low prices. So we appreciate him. And but check out Sealbox has a few of our single barrel picks that they've cleared. And the thing about our single barrel program was when we do our single barrels, we do a blend first, right? Because we're not going to just pull a stream of whiskey and pull a barrel out of it, because that would be literally the opposite of what we do. We are a blending house. So what we did was we create the blend, then we recast the blend, and then we sell the recast blends as single barrels.
Of course.
Right. So the kicker on that is we restart the angel share. So our releases have been 200 to 250 bottles. So a few of them have lasted a little longer than the single barrel one. And you can find them on Sealbox. And those Those suckers are delicious. And a
Really?
little bit more price friendly. They're $100. So if you're like real itching to if you're really itching to try Found North and maybe
Yeah.
you're looking for just like in that
Budget wise.
99.99
Yeah.
range, that's one place you might be able to find it.
Check out
Anthony,
the Still Box.
appreciate it. That our bourbon pick was ridiculous. That Sauterne. We will do more in Sauternes because of that pick. It was that was killer. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's cool. That's really cool. Really cool. Last question before we wrap it up.
Yeah.
Anthony, back to you, Anthony, as well. So Anthony said, why doesn't Found North use a lottery system for your bottles? Probably, I think Anthony's talking more about like
for the DTC releases. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anthony, we didn't know we might have to. We honestly like we weren't expecting that. We had a debate within the company whether it would sell out in the first day or not. You know, we were like, hey, we only have so many people on the mailing list. Only so many people know about Found North. Who's going to be that excited about it? And it was like we were taking bets, and it was like, okay, you know, Zach was like, I think it'll sell out over the weekend. Sammy was like, I think it'll sell out in the day. And Nick said, I think it'll. Me speaking in the third person, I said, I think it's going to sell out in 15 minutes. I was pretty pumped, but no, that being said, we were pretty surprised. We may have to introduce something like that if it keeps going. Our hope is that with a 500 bottle plus release, you know, that at least people will get a relatively fair shot at it. Yeah. And if it becomes a problem, we will introduce like, hey, this is our system. We'll figure out how to do it.
You absolutely. Well, I'm gonna end this one by just giving a huge shout out to my buddy Josh over at Stuff and Whiskey. I mean, when he said people always will reach out like friends and like, hey, this whiskey's great. And sometimes you sip it and you're like, it's okay. Sometimes you sip it, you're like, oh, it's pretty decent. And in this case, I sipped it and I was like, damn, Josh is right. Excuse my French again. This shit is delicious. I mean, it is good, like really, really good. My main memory was because you guys sent me these different bottles right before the holidays. So I'm sitting on the couch, Mrs. Judge, my daughter, who's off on the side, who I would tell you probably is the only 15-year-old girl who knows more about whiskey than probably 99% of like grown like men right in the world, literally. And I'm sitting there and I'm sipping this Found North whiskey and I'm like, oh my gosh. And my wife's like, what's going on? What's wrong? I'm like, honey, this is so good. Like, I don't know if I can stop. I'm like, I got to put it in another room. She's like, what do you mean? I was like, I got to put it in another room. So literally I went and I like
hide it from me.
I hid it from myself. I literally hid it from myself. Awesome. And I'm like, all right, I need to wait to the live stream. And it was tough, man. It was tough. But I'm telling you, I'm buying the batch tonight. Hopefully, as long as either Shared Pour or Steelbox has batch 5 left, I'm going with batch 5. If I can't get batch 5, I'm going to have to do a taste off between 4 and 6 because they're almost like 50-50 equally, like in my second place category. And I'm happy that Josh put me on to Found North. Nick, man, thank you so much for everything. Honestly, I love the energy. I love what you guys are doing. Keep doing it with you and your brother, man. Such a fantastic concept. And as they say in our world, I'm going to pour some batch 5. Forget it. Cheers.
Cheers, man.
To Found North, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Can't wait to host you up here in Boston.
Absolutely, for sure. Indeed. Cheers, everybody.
Right,
Take care, guys. See ya. Bye-bye now.